The first thing my daughter said when she walked through my door that November afternoon was not hello. She stopped in the entryway, still wearing her coat and scarf from the drive up from Nashville, and looked at me sitting in the armchair by the window with a quilt pulled up to my chin. Her eyes moved around the room slowly. The curtains were half closed, the lamp beside me was the only light on. The thermostat on the wall read 61 degrees. "Mom," she said quietly, "why is it so cold in here?" And before I could find the right words, before I could find any words at all, my daughter-in-law appeared from the hallway with her purse already over her shoulder and her car keys in her hand, as if she had been just about to leave. "The heating costs have been running high," she said in that calm, practiced voice I had learned over the past year to stop arguing with. "We've been keeping it around 60 to manage expenses. It's actually better for the immune system. Doctors recommend it." My daughter turned to look at her, then she turned back to me. "Mom, you have your teacher's pension and Dad's retirement benefits coming in every single month." She said it slowly, like she was being careful with each word. "Why are you sitting in a cold room under a blanket in your own house?" I opened my mouth, closed it. My daughter-in-law's eyes moved to me just briefly, just enough. "She's perfectly comfortable," she said. "She would tell you if she wasn't." My daughter did something then that I will never forget. She took off her coat, she folded it carefully, she set it on the arm of the couch, and she looked at my daughter-in-law and said, "I'd like to speak with my mother alone." My daughter-in-law's smile did not move, but something in her eyes did. "Of course," she said. "I was just leaving." The door clicked shut behind her. My daughter knelt in front of me on the hardwood floor, both hands wrapped around mine. Hers were warm. I hadn't realized how cold my own hands were until that moment. "Tell me honestly, are you okay?" It felt safer to say yes. I had been saying yes for almost 2 years. Instead, I said, "I'm not sure anymore." My husband passed away 26 months ago. Heart attack in his sleep on a Tuesday morning in September. We had been married 41 years. I was a high school English teacher for 32 of those years, and he was a civil engineer for nearly the same. When he retired, we planned to travel. We had a list on the refrigerator, held up by magnets we had collected over the years. National parks, coastal drives, one train trip across Canada. We had time, we told each other. We had plenty of time. After he died, I could not look at that list for 4 months. My son took it down eventually. He said he was helping me heal. That was how it always started with him. He was helping. My pension from the school district is $6,400 a month. My husband's survivor benefits bring in another $2800. Combined, that is $9,200 every single month, deposited reliably, on the same date the way it had been for years. It is enough to live well. It is enough to travel if I want. It is enough to buy groceries, pay utilities, keep the apartment at a reasonable temperature, and still put something aside. For the first 3 months after my husband died, I managed everything myself. I paid the bills. I balanced the accounts. I answered the mail. It was hard, but I did it the way I had done everything in my life. Steadily, carefully, one day at a time. Then my son sat me down at my own kitchen table and said he was worried about me. He said grief affects concentration. He said he had read about widows who made mistakes with finances during the first year. He said it wasn't about ability, it was about protection. He said his wife worked in financial management and would be glad to help, just temporarily, just until I was back on my feet. He looked at me with so much concern in his eyes. He squeezed my hand across the table. He had his father's eyes. I have always found that hard to resist. I had also that spring experienced a minor stroke, truly minor, a few hours of slurred speech, some confusion that resolved completely within a day, a clean bill of health from the neurologist 2 weeks later. But my son used those few hours the way you use a crowbar, carefully, gradually, to open something that had been shut. "You could have made a serious financial error in that state, Mom," he told me. "It could have been so much worse." I believed him. I believed I was more fragile than I felt. I signed things, several things, over several months. A power of attorney, a bank access form, a convenience authorization that my daughter-in-law explained was just to make sure bills were never late if I happened to be unwell. I signed where they pointed. I trusted the words protect and temporary and family. Within 6 months, I had stopped receiving paper statements. My daughter-in-law said she had switched everything to digital. She said she forwarded me summaries. I don't recall seeing many summaries. When I asked about my balance, she would give me a number that sounded plausible. When I asked for cash, she would bring me an envelope with $200 inside and say, "Let me know if you need more." I stopped asking for more after a while. It felt ungrateful. I stopped having lunch with the other retired teachers from my school. I told them the drive was too far. The truth was I could not afford to split a check at a restaurant anymore, and I did not know how to explain why. By the time my daughter walked through my door that November, I had not seen a full account statement in 14 months. I had $38 in my wallet. My blood pressure medication had run out 9 days earlier, and I had not refilled it. The thermostat was set to 61 degrees because my daughter-in-law had told me, 3 weeks before, that we were in a tight month. I had not fully understood what that meant. I had not asked for clarification. I was ashamed of that, too. My daughter sat across from me at the kitchen table, with a legal pad she found in my desk and a pen she had brought herself. She was methodical and she was furious, and she was very careful not to let the fury show while she was asking me questions. "Mom, how much do you get each month total, pension and Dad's benefits combined?" $9,200, I said. She wrote it down. "And when did you last see a bank statement?" I told her. She wrote that down too. "When did you last have access to your own account login?" I looked at the table. My daughter-in-law reset it when they moved everything to digital. She said she'd set me up with my own login later. That was about a year ago. My daughter stopped writing. She was quiet for a moment. "Mom, did you know your prescription ran out?" "Yes." "And you didn't refill it?" "I didn't want to ask for money for it. She said we were in a tight month." The pen went down on the table. Very quietly, my daughter pressed both hands flat on the surface and took a slow breath. "You are a retired teacher with $9,200 coming into your account every single month," she said. "And you couldn't refill a $40 prescription." When she said it out loud like that, it sounded impossible. But it had been my life for over a year, and somehow I had accepted it piece by piece without ever seeing the whole picture. "Tomorrow morning," my daughter said, "we are going to the bank, you and me." That night she ordered food delivered. I realized, sitting across from her while we ate, that I had not had a full meal in 2 days. I had been eating crackers and canned soup, and telling myself I wasn't very hungry anyway. After dinner she tried to log into my email on my old laptop. The password had been changed. She tried to access the banking app on my phone. It required a verification code sent to a secondary email address, not mine. "She changed your recovery contact," my daughter said softly, staring at the screen. I didn't answer. "Mom," she set the phone face down on the table, "how long ago did you stop having any real access to your own money?" The question made something in my chest go very tight. I don't know exactly. It happened slowly. I didn't see it happening. She nodded once. "That's how it works." She made up the couch for herself. I went to bed but lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, doing arithmetic in my head. $9,200 a month, 26 months since my son had first suggested the arrangement. That was $239,000, give or take whatever bills had genuinely been paid. Where had the rest gone? I didn't have an answer yet, but I had decided something, lying there in the dark. I was done letting other people make that decision for me. My son called at 7 in the morning. My daughter answered my phone. "She's fine," she said. "We're going to the bank this morning." There was a pause. Then his voice shifted. I could hear it from across the room. "That's not necessary," he said. "I handle everything. There's a process." "The process," my daughter said, "is that our mother asks to see her account and someone shows it to her. We'll be there at 9. He arrived 40 minutes later with my daughter-in-law beside him. My son stood in the living room with his hands in his jacket pockets, and for a moment I saw him the way I used to. My boy, 34 years old, the child I had walked to school and sat up late worrying about when he was 17, and driving too fast. I loved him the way you love someone you raised from nothing. That love did not disappear, but it sat differently now, heavier, like it had taken on something it wasn't designed to carry. "Mom," he said, and his voice was gentle. "You don't understand the full picture. There are things in motion right now. If you go to the bank and trigger a review, it could destabilize everything." "Destabilize what?" my daughter asked. He looked at her, then at me. "I've been building something, an investment structure. It's complex, it takes time, but it's for you, it's all for you, Mom. Give it 3 more months and everything looks different." She didn't have money for her blood pressure medication, my daughter said. "Her thermostat is at 61 degrees. My son's jaw tightened. That was a miscommunication with your wife. My daughter's voice stayed even. "Who controls every dollar of Mum's money?" My daughter-in-law stepped forward. She had been quiet until then. I manage the accounts as a service to this family. She asked me to. She asked for help while she was grieving, my daughter said. That is not the same thing as handing over her life. I stood up from the armchair. Both of them looked at me. I would like to see my account, I said, today. My son's face changed, not with anger, with something that looked more like fear. Mom, please. I would like to see my account, I said again. The branch manager was a calm, careful woman who looked at my identification, typed for a moment, and then looked at my daughter. Mrs. Thorne, we do have a power of attorney on file for your son. But your name is, still, the primary account holder. You have every right to access this information. She printed 3 pages and slid them across the desk. I looked at the current balance first. The number was $203. Then I looked at the monthly transfers, $7,400 every month, going to an account registered to something called Thorne Capital Consulting LLC. 14 months of that. My daughter did the math quietly. That's over $100,000. The records going back 22 months, the manager said carefully, show total outgoing transfers of approximately $214,000. The room felt very still. What is Thorne Capital Consulting? My daughter asked. It appears to be a private investment entity, the manager said. She paused. I should also tell you, there is a home equity document on file. Your apartment was listed as collateral against a loan taken in the LLC's name 8 months ago. My daughter put her hand on my arm. I thought about the refrigerator magnets, the list of national parks, the train across Canada. I want a full investigation, I said. My voice was steadier than I expected it to be. I want to know every transfer, every authorization, and I want that collateral arrangement reviewed. The manager nodded. That will involve freezing the connected accounts temporarily. That's fine, I said. My phone buzzed on the drive home, an unknown number. The message read, don't make this worse than it needs to be. Call it off. I showed my daughter. She took a photograph of the message without saying anything and forwarded it to herself. When we got back to my apartment, the front door was unlocked. I was certain I had locked it. We stood on the threshold and looked in. The apartment appeared the same, but the drawer of my small desk was open. The folder where I kept copies of important documents, my lease, my car title, my late husband's death certificate, had been disturbed. Papers were slightly out of order, in a way they hadn't been that morning. We're calling the police, my daughter said. 2 officers came and took a report. No signs of forced entry. My son had a spare key. My daughter-in-law had one too. The officers asked if I wanted to file a statement. I said yes. On the kitchen table, tucked under the fruit bowl, was a business card I did not recognize. The name on it read Garrison Platt, Wealth Transition Specialist. My daughter photographed that too. My son came back that evening without my daughter-in-law. He stood in the doorway and looked tired in a way I had not seen before, the kind of tired that comes from something collapsing inside. Mom, he said, can I come in? He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had first convinced me to sign the documents, and he put his face in his hands for a long moment. I got in over my head, he said. After Dad died, I thought I could build something real, something that would take care of you for the rest of your life. Garrison told me the strategy was sound. He said using an existing pension as the collateral base was a standard structure. He said it was legal. Legal and right are not the same thing, my daughter said quietly. He looked at her. I know. Did you know Mum had no access to her own account, she asked. That she was eating crackers because there wasn't money for groceries. He was silent for too long. Your sister-in-law handled the day-to-day. I wasn't watching closely enough. She ran out of blood pressure medication, my daughter said, after a stroke, while she was receiving $9,000 a month. He closed his eyes. I looked at him sitting across from me and I tried to hold 2 things at the same time, the boy I had raised and the man who had let this happen. I believe he had not started out trying to hurt me. He had started out proud and afraid of failing after his father was gone, afraid of being the kind of man who asked for help, and he had let someone talk him into a structure that used my security to patch over his fear. Pride had grown into deception. Deception had grown into something neither of us had a clean word for. But the empty pantry had been real, the cold room had been real, the message on my phone had been real. How much is left in the consulting account? I asked. He exhaled. 11,000, maybe 12. Garrison took his percentage at every stage. There was a development deal that collapsed, bad positions before that. And the apartment collateral, I said. Can they take it? He looked at the table. Technically, yes. That's why Garrison wants you to withdraw the bank review. He thinks if we can get a few more months, there's a chance to restructure. My daughter said, or he wants a few more months to move whatever is left before investigators arrive. My son looked up, something crossed his face. Doubt, real doubt, the kind that cracks something open. When did you last see the fund's actual statements? My daughter asked him. Not his summary, the actual paperwork. He didn't answer. He protected himself, she said, and her voice was quieter than I expected. Not you. The attorney arrived the next morning. She reviewed the documents my son brought, the power of attorney, the LLC filing, the collateral agreement, and she looked at me across my own kitchen table. Mrs. Thorne, you have a strong case. The power of attorney gave your son authorization to manage your affairs in your interest. Routing $200,000 into a speculative private fund operated by a third-party consultant does not meet that standard. What about the apartment? I asked. The collateral agreement is serious, she said, but because it was executed under a power of attorney, without evidence you were informed of the risk, we have grounds to challenge it. Combined with the bank's investigation, most lenders will prefer to renegotiate rather than face scrutiny in a legal proceeding. She looked at me carefully. This will not be fast, but your position is stronger than it feels right now. My daughter-in-law came by that afternoon. She stood outside the door and did not come in when my daughter opened it. Her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. I want you to know, she said, looking at me over my daughter's shoulder, that I genuinely believed it was going to work. I want you to know I'm sorry. I looked at her for a long moment. Believing it would work, I said, does not explain the thermostat. She had no answer for that, there wasn't one. The investigation took 11 weeks. Garrison Platt, it turned out, had a professional conduct complaint filed against him in another state from 3 years prior. A similar pattern, a grieving widow, a private LLC, funds moved quickly before any review could be completed. That complaint had been settled quietly. This time it was not settled quietly. The bank filed a suspicious activity report. A regulatory body opened a separate inquiry into his licensing. My attorney filed to have the collateral agreement voided on grounds of undisclosed material risk to a vulnerable adult acting under grief and diminished access to information. The lender agreed to remove the apartment from collateral status rather than participate in the legal proceedings. The threatening messages were traced to an associate of Garrison's. Someone he had used before to pressure clients and family members into backing down. That information became part of the regulatory file. My son did not go to prison. I say that plainly, and I will not pretend it is a simple thing to feel about. He cooperated fully with the investigation. He provided documentation that helped investigators trace Garrison's pattern across several other clients. He will spend a long stretch of years in formal repayment, to me first and then to others. His name is attached to something now that he will spend a long time living down. Whether that is justice or something more complicated, I am still deciding. What I can tell you is what happened to me. Every authorization was revoked. The power of attorney, the account access, all of it, cancelled. My accounts were returned to me with a login that only I control. My statements arrive in my own email. I see every transaction the moment it occurs. I called my doctor and scheduled the follow-up appointments I had missed. I refilled my prescription. I called the property manager about the thermostat, which turned out to have needed a minor repair all along. Something that would have cost $40 to fix if anyone had bothered to look. I went to lunch with 3 women I used to teach with. I ordered whatever I wanted. When the check came, I did not feel that small, quiet shame that had lived in me so long. I had started to think it was simply part of being old. It is not part of being old. My daughter stayed for 2 weeks. The night before she drove back to Nashville, we sat at the kitchen table with tea and she said, "I should have visited sooner. I should have seen it." I made it easy not to see, I said. I told myself I was being helped. Then I told myself it was temporary. Then I stopped asking questions because asking felt ungrateful. I kept making it smaller and smaller until I disappeared inside it. She was quiet for a while. "Mom," she said, "you were grieving. You were recovering. You trusted your son because you raised him to deserve trust, and he made choices that were not worthy of it. That is not the same as failing." I have thought about that many times since she left. I think she is right. I also think I learned something about silence. About how it can look like peace, feel like acceptance, even feel like love when it's actually none of those things. Silence had made me easy to manage. And I had mistaken that smallness for humility, and that humility for virtue, and by the time I understood what had happened to me, I was sitting in the dark under a quilt, my breath visible in the cold air of my own home, grateful for an envelope with $200 in it. The refrigerator magnet list is back on the wall. I put it up myself the week after the accounts were restored. I added 2 more destinations to it. I have already booked the first one. I am 67 years old, my hands are steady, my mind is clear. The heat in this apartment is set to exactly the temperature I choose. And if you are listening to this right now, if something in this story sounds familiar, if you have been telling yourself that asking questions is ungrateful, that needing to see your own account is a burden, that silence is just another word for keeping the peace, then I want you to hear this as plainly as I can say it. You are allowed to know where your money goes. You are allowed to see your own balance. You are allowed to be warm in your own home. Age is not a condition that requires your consent to be taken from you. And sometimes the bravest thing is not a dramatic gesture, not a confrontation, not the moment someone sets something down on a table to signal that everything is about to change. Sometimes the bravest thing is simply saying, "I would like to see my account," and meaning it enough to walk through the door.